The Echoes from the Atlantic Gap, Act I. February 1942. North Atlantic Ocean. The water is black, infinite, merciless. Waves rise like mountains, crash like thunder, send spray 40 feet into freezing air. Wind screams through steel cables, tears at anything not welded down, makes the entire ship groan and shudder like a living creature in pain. This is the Atlantic in winter, and it shows no mercy to the men who dare cross it. HMCS Snowberry rides these waves, a Flower-class corvette, one of hundreds built by Canada to escort merchant convoys across the Atlantic. She's small, barely 200 feet long, displacing only 1,000 tons. Built for coastal patrol, now forced into deep ocean service because Britain is desperate, Canada is stretched thin, and the war demands every ship available. The Snowberry wasn't designed for this. Her crew wasn't trained for this. But here they are anyway, 300 miles from Newfoundland, 400 miles from Ireland, alone in the middle of the Atlantic Gap. The Gap. That's what sailors call it, the dead zone, the killing ground, the stretch of ocean beyond the range of land-based aircraft. Too far from North America for Canadian and American planes to reach. Too far from Britain and Iceland for RAF patrols to cover. Right in the middle, 600 miles of unprotected water where German U-boats hunt freely, attacking convoys that have no air support, no warning, no defense except the few escort ships struggling to protect 40, 50, 60 merchant vessels spread across miles of ocean. Leading seaman Thomas Harper stands radio watch in the Snowberry's cramped communications room. He's 23 years old, from Halifax, enlisted in 1940 when the war was still young and Canada was still innocent. He trained for 6 months, learned Morse code, radio procedures, signal protocols. The instructors taught him how to send messages, how to receive them, how to maintain equipment. They didn't teach him what to do when the messages are screams for help from dying ships, and you can't answer, can't help, can't do anything except listen and document death. Harper adjusts his headphones, fine-tunes the receiver, monitors multiple frequencies simultaneously. His log book lies open before him, partially filled with routine entries. Weather reports. Position updates. Course changes. Normal peacetime radio traffic. But this isn't peacetime. This is February 1942, and the Atlantic is on fire. The Battle of the Atlantic has been raging since the war began in 1939, but now, in early 1942, it's reaching a terrible crescendo. German U-boats are winning. They're sinking ships faster than the Allies can build them. Tonnage lost exceeds tonnage constructed. The mathematics are simple and brutal. If this continues, Britain starves, the war ends, Germany wins. Everything depends on getting convoys through. Food, fuel, weapons, ammunition, supplies, everything Britain needs to survive crosses the Atlantic in merchant ships. And those ships are dying by the dozens. The Snowberry left Halifax 5 days ago, escorting convoy HX-175, 42 merchant ships bound for Liverpool with cargo holds full of food, oil, steel, lumber, everything Britain desperately needs. For the first 2 days, the crossing was routine. Cold, rough, miserable, but routine. The convoy maintained formation, the escorts patrolled their sectors, no threats materialized. The convoy commodore, an elderly retired admiral commanding from the bridge of a converted merchant ship, signaled optimism. Perhaps this crossing would be lucky. Perhaps the U-boats would miss them. Perhaps they'd slip through the gap undetected. That hope died yesterday evening when the first ship exploded. SS Caroline, a Canadian freighter hauling grain, simply erupted in fire and smoke amidships. Torpedo strike. No warning. One moment she was steaming normally in her position. The next moment she was burning, listing, sinking. The explosion killed most of her crew instantly. The few survivors abandoned ship in lifeboats, rowing desperately away from the sinking wreck. The Snowberry raced to the scene, but by the time they arrived, the Caroline was gone, slipped beneath the waves, leaving only debris and oil and bodies floating in the water. The Snowberry rescued 12 men from the freezing Atlantic. 12 survivors from a crew of 45. They pulled the men aboard, wrapped them in blankets, gave them hot coffee, listened to their stammered accounts. They never saw the U-boat. Never heard the torpedo. Just explosion, chaos, fire, water, death. Standard U-boat tactics. Attack at night or in bad weather. Fire torpedoes from beyond visual range. Kill quickly. Disappear before escorts can respond. Hunt the next target. After the Carolyn sank, the convoy scattered, individual ships breaking formation, captains panicking, each vessel trying to save itself. The Commodore spent hours on the radio, ordering ships back into formation, re-establishing order, preventing total chaos. The escorts, including the Snowberry, patrolled frantically, dropping depth charges at suspected sonar contacts, most of which turned out to be false readings, whale sounds, thermal layers, ocean phenomena that look like submarines on primitive detection equipment. Now, 24 hours later, the convoy has reformed, but everyone knows the U-boats are still out there, circling, waiting, preparing for the next attack. Wolf Pack Tactics. Multiple submarines coordinated by radio, working together to overwhelm escorts, slaughter merchant ships efficiently and systematically. The Germans have perfected this. They're very, very good at it. Harper monitors the radio frequencies, listening to the chatter, the coded signals, the routine traffic. Suddenly, cutting through the static, a voice. Young, scared, desperate. Mayday, mayday, mayday. This is SS Portland Rose. We've been hit. We're taking water. Position 49 north, 31 west. We need help. Please, someone help us. Harper's hand freezes over his log book. His heart stops. He knows that ship. The Portland Rose is part of their convoy, steaming 3 miles south of the Snowberry's current position. American freighter, carrying ammunition and aviation fuel. If she's been torpedoed, if she's carrying what Harper thinks she's carrying, she won't just sink. She'll explode. She'll take her entire crew with her, vaporized in a fireball visible for miles. He reaches for the intercom to alert the bridge, but before he can speak, another voice cuts in on the radio. Different frequency, different ship. Mayday, this is SS Northern Star. Torpedo strike. Engine room flooded. Ship is listing 30 degrees. Abandoning ship. Position 48 north, 30 west. Any vessels in area, we need immediate assistance. 2 ships. 2 torpedoes. 2 strikes within seconds of each other. The Wolf Pack is attacking, multiple U-boats firing simultaneously, overwhelming the escorts, creating chaos, preparing to slaughter the convoy systematically, one ship at a time. Harper alerts the bridge. The captain, Lieutenant Commander James McDonald, a career naval officer who looks 60 but is probably 45, aged prematurely by stress and responsibility, responds immediately. How many distress calls? 2 confirmed, sir. Portland Rose and Northern Star. Both hit, both sinking. Positions? Harper reads the coordinates. McDonald curses, a rare break in his professional composure. Both ships are miles away, in opposite directions. The Snowberry can't reach both. They have to choose. Save one, abandon the other. Make the calculation. Play God. Decide who lives and who dies. Set course for the Portland Rose, McDonald orders. Signal the other escorts. Tell them Northern Star needs assistance. We're going after the ammunition ship. The Snowberry turns, engine straining, pushing her maximum 15 knots, which feels impossibly slow when every second matters. Harper returns to his radio, monitoring, listening, documenting. The Portland Rose is still transmitting, her radio operator sending continuous updates. Water rising in holds 2 and 3. List increasing. Captain ordering abandoned ship. We need help now. Please, someone respond. Harper wants to respond, wants to tell them help is coming, wants to offer hope. But he can't. Radio silence is protocol. Broadcasting their position helps the U-boats track them. He sits silent, listening to the Portland Rose dying, unable to speak, unable to help, able only to witness. Minutes pass. 10 minutes. 15. The Snowberry pushes through heavy seas, spray washing over the bow, ice forming on every surface. Harper hears the Portland Rose's transmission growing weaker, more desperate. Ship is going down. We're in the boats. Water is so cold. Can anyone hear us? Please, we're freezing. We need help. Then the transmission cuts off. Mid-sentence. Just stops. Harper adjusts his receiver, thinking maybe the signal faded, maybe atmospheric conditions interrupted transmission. But he knows the truth. The Portland Rose is gone. Slipped beneath the waves. Her radio operator, whoever he was, whatever his name, he's in the water now. In a lifeboat if he's lucky. Dead if he's not. The Atlantic in February is fatal within minutes without survival suits. The merchant sailors don't have survival suits. They have life jackets and hope, and neither provides much protection against water cold enough to kill in 3 minutes, 5 if you're strong, 10 if you're incredibly lucky. The Snowberry reaches the last known position of the Portland Rose 28 minutes after the initial distress call. Too late. Much too late. The ship is gone, already sunk, leaving only debris fields spreading across the surface. Wreckage, cargo containers, life rafts, bodies. The searchlights sweep the water, revealing scenes from nightmare. Men floating face down, already dead from hypothermia. Men clinging to wreckage, too weak to wave, too cold to call out. Men in lifeboats, huddled together, trying to share warmth, trying to survive until rescue comes. The crew of the Snowberry works desperately, throwing lines, pulling men aboard, dragging frozen bodies from the water. Many are already dead, blue-faced, rigid, gone. Others are barely alive, hypothermic, unconscious, requiring immediate medical attention the small corvette isn't equipped to provide. They save 14 men. 14 survivors from a crew of 52. The rest are dead or dying, scattered across miles of ocean, beyond help, beyond hope. Harper remains at his radio station during the rescue operation. He can't help on deck. He's needed here, monitoring communications, maintaining contact with other ships, coordinating search efforts. He listens to the Northern Star's final transmission, broadcast by another escort that reached her position. Same story. Ship torpedoed. Crew abandoned. Most dead from exposure. Few survivors. Another merchant ship, another crew, another group of men who left home expecting to return, now dead in the Atlantic, feeding the fish, adding to the thousands already lost in this endless battle. The Snowberry's captain makes the decision to rejoin the convoy. They can't stay here searching. Every minute spent rescuing survivors is a minute the convoy travels unprotected. Their duty is to the living ships, the 40 remaining vessels still steaming toward Britain, still carrying vital cargo, still targets for the wolf pack circling somewhere beneath the waves. The dead must be left. The dying must be abandoned. This is war. This is the Atlantic. This is February 1942. The corvette turns, increases speed, races to catch the convoy. Harper secures his rescued survivors below deck, wrapped in blankets, drinking hot soup, shaking with cold and shock. They tell the same story the Carolyn survivors told. No warning. No contact. Just explosion, water, death. The U-boats are invisible, untouchable, impossible to fight. The escorts drop depth charges, but the ocean is vast, the submarine small, the chances of hitting anything microscopic. It's like trying to kill a mosquito in a cathedral by throwing rocks in the dark. The night deepens. The Snowberry rejoins the convoy, taking up her assigned position on the convoy's southern flank. The merchant ships steam onward, maintaining formation, following the Commodore's orders, pretending normalcy while knowing death circles beneath them. The escorts patrol frantically, their Aztec operators listening for submarine sounds, their lookouts scanning for periscope wakes, their crews at battle stations, exhausted, terrified, unable to rest because resting means dying. Harper sits at his radio, headphones pressed tight, listening to the frequencies, monitoring the traffic. The Atlantic night is full of sounds. Static. Distant thunder. Radio interference from approaching weather front. Commercial traffic from distant ships outside the war zone. And underneath it all, occasional burst of German radio transmission, brief, coded, impossible to decrypt but terrifying simply by existing. The U-boats are talking to each other, coordinating, planning, preparing for the next attack. 3 a.m. Harper is exhausted, struggling to stay awake, drinking bad coffee, rubbing his eyes, forcing himself to concentrate. Suddenly, cutting through the static, another voice. British accent this time. Formal, controlled, professional despite underlying fear. Mayday, mayday, mayday. This is HMS Firedrake. We have been torpedoed. Severe damage to engine room. Ship is dead in water. Position 47 north, 29 west. Requesting immediate assistance. HMS Firedrake. Not a merchant ship. A destroyer, one of the convoy's escorts, a warship specifically designed to hunt submarines. And she's been hit. The U-boats aren't just attacking merchants anymore. They're killing the defenders, eliminating the escorts, leaving the convoy completely unprotected. Harper alerts the bridge. MacDonald's voice comes back, flat, emotionless, the tone of a man who has seen too much, felt too much, and shut down his emotions to function. Acknowledged. Signal the convoy Commodore. Continue monitoring. More reports follow throughout the night. Another merchant ship torpedoed. Another escort damaged. Another crew dying in the water. The wolf pack is methodical, efficient, professional. They're not just killing ships. They're destroying the convoy systematically, taking their time, choosing targets carefully, maximizing destruction. By dawn, 7 ships are gone. 7 vessels that left Halifax 5 days ago with full crews and vital cargo, now resting on the Atlantic floor 3 miles down, their crews dead, their cargo lost, their sacrifice meaningless except as statistics in the endless accounting of tonnage lost and lives wasted. The Snowberry survives the night, but Harper doesn't sleep, can't sleep, won't sleep. He remains at his radio station, listening, monitoring, documenting death. His log book fills with entries. Times, positions, ships lost, men dead. Clinical language disguising human tragedy. 0237 hours, SS Portland Rose reported sinking. 0401 hours, HMS Firedrake reported torpedoed. 0523 hours, SS Northern Star confirmed lost with all hands. The sun rises on February 14, 1942. Valentine's Day. Harper remembers this because his girlfriend, Sarah, back in Halifax, she mentioned in her last letter that she hoped he'd be home for Valentine's Day. He's not home. He's here, in the Atlantic Gap, listening to men die, unable to help, unable to stop the killing, able only to witness and document and survive. The convoy continues eastward, toward Britain, toward safety, toward the range of RAF Coastal Command aircraft that can provide air cover, spot submarines, force the U-boats to submerge and lose contact. But Britain is still 3 days away. 3 more days in the gap. 3 more nights of attacks. 3 more opportunities for the wolf pack to slaughter merchant ships and kill sailors. Harper looks at his radio equipment, the dials and switches and frequency markers that have become his entire world. This machine connects him to ships across hundreds of miles of ocean. It lets him hear distress calls from vessels he'll never see, from men he'll never meet, from people dying beyond his ability to help. It's a window into hell, a front row seat to massacre, a reminder that war isn't glorious or heroic or meaningful. It's just death, occurring again and again, pointlessly, endlessly, until someone wins or everyone dies or the world ends and none of it matters anyway. He adjusts his headphones, checks his frequencies, prepares for another day of listening to men die. The Snowberry plows eastward through heavy seas, her crew exhausted, her captain grim, her mission impossible. Protect the convoy. Get the ships through. Deliver the cargo. Save Britain. Win the war. Simple orders. Impossible execution. But they'll try anyway, because that's what sailors do. They go to sea. They face death. They do their duty even when duty demands more than humans can give. The radio crackles with static, the endless background noise of the Atlantic. Harper listens, waiting for the next distress call, the next torpedo strike, the next ship dying. He knows it's coming. The U-boats are still out there, patient, predatory, professional. They'll attack again. More ships will die. More men will drown in freezing water, screaming for help that won't come, calling for rescue that can't arrive in time. And Harper will listen. He'll document. He'll witness. Because someone has to. Someone must bear testimony to what's happening here, in the Atlantic Gap, where men die alone and unremembered, where ships sink without trace, where the ocean swallows everything and keeps all secrets. Someone must remember. Someone must tell the story. Someone must ensure that when this war finally ends, when the killing finally stops, the world knows what it cost, what was sacrificed, what was lost in these dark waters where hope drowns and courage dies and the only victory is survival. The first act of Harper's war has begun, and he doesn't yet know that what he hears today will haunt him for the rest of his life, that the voices calling for help across these frequencies will echo in his dreams for decades, that 20 years from now he'll hear those same transmissions again, impossible and inexplicable, reaching across time itself to remind him that some things, once heard, can never be forgotten. The Echoes from the Atlantic Gap, Act 2. February 1942 continues. The convoy pushes eastward through the Atlantic Gap, and the killing doesn't stop. The U-boats shadow them like wolves tracking wounded prey, patient, methodical, waiting for darkness to attack again. Harper remains at his radio station, monitoring frequencies, logging transmissions, bearing witness to the systematic destruction of ships and men. The second night brings fresh horror. At 2,147 hours, 3 ships are hit simultaneously. Coordinated attack, perfectly executed, the wolf pack firing from multiple positions, overwhelming the escort's ability to respond. Harper hears all 3 distress calls at once, voices overlapping, creating cacophony of terror that makes it impossible to distinguish individual words. He tries to separate the signals, identify the ships, record accurate information. His hands shake as he writes. His log-book entries become increasingly illegible, scratched notations that barely capture the chaos unfolding across hundreds of miles of dark ocean. SS Manchester Trader, British freighter carrying steel and machinery. Torpedoed amidships, broke in half, sank in 4 minutes. No survivors recovered. Entire crew, 43 men, gone. SS Atlantic Sun, Norwegian tanker loaded with aviation fuel. Hit in the stern, fuel ignited, created fireball visible 20 miles away. The explosion was so massive that ships on the convoy's far edge felt the concussion, heard the boom rolling across the water like distant thunder. The tanker burned for 17 minutes before her fuel tanks exploded again, breaking her back, sending her to the bottom. Harper listened to her radio operator transmit continuously until the very end, his voice calm, professional, reporting the fire, the spreading flames, the crew abandoning ship. Then the final explosion, and the transmission cut off mid-word, replaced by static, by silence, by nothing. MV Canadian Pioneer, cargo ship carrying grain and timber. Torpedoed but didn't sink immediately. She stayed afloat, listing badly, her crew launching lifeboats, abandoning ship in relatively good order. The Snowberry altered course to assist, racing toward the sinking vessel. Harper monitored the Pioneer's transmissions, heard her captain coordinating the evacuation, counting his men, ensuring everyone got off safely. Professional to the end, that captain. He was the last man off, standing on the tilting deck, waiting until every crew member was in the boats before climbing down himself. The Snowberry reached the scene 40 minutes after the torpedo strike. The Canadian Pioneer was still afloat, barely, her deck awash, her cargo holds flooded, her death inevitable but slow. The corvette's crew recovered 3 lifeboats, pulling 72 men from the water. 72 survivors. A miracle by Atlantic standards. Most torpedoed ships lose 3/4 of their crews. The Pioneer's captain had saved his men through discipline, training, and luck. But as the Snowberry worked to recover the lifeboats, Harper heard something on his radio that made his blood freeze. A transmission on the emergency frequency, faint, distant, barely audible through the static. A voice calling for help. Not from the Canadian Pioneer. Not from any ship in their immediate area. From somewhere else, somewhere far away, beyond their range to assist. Mayday, Mayday. This is SS Brookfield. Position 52 north, 35 west. We've been hit. We're sinking. Water is rising fast. We need help. Is anyone listening? Can anyone hear us? Please, we're dying out here. Harper checked the coordinates. The Brookfield was over 200 miles northwest of the Snowberry's position. Outside their convoy, traveling alone or with a different group. Completely beyond their ability to assist. He reported the transmission to the bridge. MacDonald acknowledged, asked if any other ships were closer. Harper checked, monitoring all frequencies, searching for vessels that might respond to the Brookfield's distress call. Nothing. No responses. No ships acknowledging the mayday. The Brookfield was alone in the Atlantic, torpedoed, sinking, calling desperately into the void. Harper listened to her radio operator transmit continuously for 12 minutes. The voice grew increasingly desperate, increasingly panicked. The professional calm cracked, revealing the terrified young man beneath, someone's son, someone's brother, someone who joined the merchant marine expecting adventure and found death instead. Please, someone answer. Anyone. We're in the boats now. The ship is going down. We're alone out here. The water is so cold. We won't last long. Please, if anyone can hear this, send help. Send someone. Don't let us die out here alone. Then silence. The transmission ended. The Brookfield was gone, her crew adrift in lifeboats, 200 miles from the nearest ship, in water cold enough to kill in minutes. They wouldn't survive until morning. They'd die of exposure, one by one, huddled together for warmth that wouldn't come, waiting for rescue that would never arrive. And Harper had listened to it all, heard every word, documented every detail, unable to help, unable to respond, unable to do anything except witness their deaths. This became the pattern. Night after night, the attacks continued. Ships died. Crews drowned. Harper listened to their final transmissions, logged their last words, bore witness to their suffering. The convoy continued eastward, diminishing gradually, bleeding ships every night, leaving a trail of wreckage and bodies across the Atlantic. By February 18, the convoy had lost 14 ships. 14 out of the original 42. 1/3 of the merchant vessels destroyed in 6 days. The survivors pressed on, maintaining formation, following orders, hoping they'd reach air cover before the U-boats killed them all. The escorts, including the Snowberry, were exhausted, their crews operating on minimal sleep, sustained by coffee and fear and duty. Harper barely slept anymore. He couldn't. Every time he closed his eyes, he heard the voices from the radio. The distress calls. The maydays. The desperate pleas for help that he couldn't answer. The transmissions haunted him, invaded his dreams, made rest impossible. He'd lie in his bunk, exhausted beyond measure, and hear phantom voices calling through the static, ships that didn't exist transmitting from positions hundreds of miles away, men drowning in seas he couldn't reach. The ship's medical officer, a young doctor pressed into naval service, noticed Harper's deterioration. The weight loss, the exhaustion, the trembling hands, the inability to focus. He recommended Harper be relieved from radio duty, given time to recover, treated for what would later be called combat fatigue or shell shock or post-traumatic stress. MacDonald refused. They were short-handed, undermanned, desperate. Everyone was exhausted. Everyone was traumatized. Harper would stay at his post until they reached Britain or until he collapsed completely. February 19. The convoy finally approached the edge of the gap, entering range of RAF Coastal Command aircraft operating from Iceland. A Sunderland flying boat appeared overhead at dawn, circling protectively, its presence forcing the U-boats to submerge, to break contact, to abandon their pursuit. The attack stopped. The killing paused. The convoy continued unmolested for the first time in a week. The relief was overwhelming. Men emerged from below decks, stood on railings, watched the aircraft circle overhead, felt hope for the first time in days. They'd survived. They'd crossed the gap. They'd lost 14 ships and hundreds of men, but the rest would make it. Britain would get her cargo. The war would continue. Their sacrifice had meaning. Harper remained at his radio station, monitoring frequencies out of habit, out of duty, out of inability to do anything else. The distress calls had stopped. The maydays had ended. The Atlantic was relatively quiet, filled only with routine traffic, position reports, weather updates, normal peacetime communications. But then, cutting through the static, he heard something impossible. A voice, faint but clear, transmitting on the emergency frequency. Mayday, Mayday, Mayday. This is SS Brookfield. We've been hit. We're sinking. Position 52 north, 35 west. Please, someone help us. Harper's blood went cold. The Brookfield. He remembered that ship, remembered her distress call from 5 days ago, remembered listening to her crew die in the water. The Brookfield was gone, sunk, destroyed. This had to be a different ship, a coincidence, someone using the same name. He checked his logs, found the original entry. Same position. Same coordinates. Exactly the same transmission, word for word. He reported it to the bridge. MacDonald came to the radio room personally, listened to the transmission himself. His face went pale. That's impossible. The Brookfield sank 5 days ago. We logged it. You documented it. This has to be some kind of echo, atmospheric conditions reflecting old transmissions. But the voice continued, repeating the distress call, the same desperate plea for help. Harper and MacDonald listened together, hearing the transmission grow weaker, fade gradually, then cut off exactly as it had 5 days earlier. 12 minutes of transmission. Identical timing. Identical content. Impossible, but happening. MacDonald ordered Harper to say nothing about this to the crew. Equipment malfunction, he said. Old transmission caught in atmospheric layers, delayed somehow, replayed by freak conditions. Rational explanations for impossible events. Harper wanted to believe him, wanted to accept the logical interpretation. But he'd heard the Brookfield die. He'd documented her sinking. And now he'd heard her die again, exactly the same way, at exactly the same time. The convoy reached Liverpool on February 21, 1942. 28 ships survived out of 42. 14 lost in 10 days. The Snowberry tied up at the dock, her crew exhausted, traumatized, grateful to be alive. They'd done their duty, delivered their convoy, completed their mission. The Royal Navy commended them for their service, praised their professionalism, noted their efficiency in rescuing survivors. Harper was granted shore leave, ordered to rest, recover, prepare for the next convoy. He found lodging in a small boarding house near the docks, a room barely larger than his cabin aboard ship, but it was quiet, private, safe. He tried to sleep. He couldn't. Every time he closed his eyes, he heard the voices. The distress calls. The maydays. The Brookfield, transmitting from beyond death, calling across the void, begging for help that would never come. He spent 3 days in Liverpool, wandering the streets, drinking in pubs, trying to process what he'd experienced. The city was scarred by German bombing, entire neighborhoods reduced to rubble, but life continued. People went to work, children played in the streets, shops sold goods, the machinery of civilization ground onward despite the destruction. The contrast was jarring. Here, life. Out there, in the Atlantic, death. Separated by days of sailing, by hundreds of miles, by experiences that couldn't be communicated to people who hadn't lived them. On his 3rd day ashore, Harper visited the Admiralty offices, seeking information about the SS Brookfield. He told the clerk he'd intercepted her distress call, wanted to know if any survivors had been recovered, if any ships had responded to her mayday. The clerk checked the records, came back shaking his head. The Brookfield was lost with all hands on February 14, 1942. Torpedoed by U-boat, position confirmed by German radio intercepts. No survivors recovered. No rescue attempts possible due to distance from convoy routes. "I'm sorry." Harper thanked him, left the office, walked back to his boarding house in a daze. February 14. The same day he'd heard the original transmission. The Brookfield had died exactly when and where he'd documented. And 5 days later, he'd heard her die again. Same position. Same transmission. Same desperate plea for help. He tried to rationalize it. Atmospheric conditions. Radio echoes. Delayed transmissions bouncing off the ionosphere. Technical explanations for impossible events. But deep down, he knew those explanations were insufficient. He'd heard something genuine, something real, something that defied rational understanding. The Brookfield had called across time, across death, had reached him specifically, had chosen him as witness to her suffering. The Snowberry sailed again on February 25, escorting another convoy westbound to Halifax. Empty ships returning for more cargo, the endless cycle of the Atlantic War. Harper returned to his radio station, resumed his duties, monitored his frequencies. The crossing was relatively quiet. No major U-boat attacks. A few alarms, some depth charge drops, but no ships lost. They reached Halifax safely, delivered their convoy, prepared to turn around and cross again. But Harper was changed. The experience in the gap had marked him, damaged him, left scars that wouldn't heal. He continued performing his duties professionally, maintaining his logs, monitoring his transmissions. But part of him remained in the Atlantic, listening to phantom voices, hearing ships that no longer existed calling for help across dark waters. March 1942. April. May. The convoys continued. The Battle of the Atlantic raged on. Harper sailed 6 more times, crossed the ocean 12 more times, listened to hundreds more distress calls from dying ships. Each crossing brought new horrors, new losses, new voices added to the chorus of the dead that haunted his dreams. But he never heard the Brookfield again. That transmission, that impossible echo from February, remained unique, unexplained, inexplicable. He checked the frequencies constantly, listening for her call, half hoping, half dreading that he'd hear her voice again. But the Atlantic remained silent on that frequency, as if the Brookfield had said everything she needed to say, had delivered her message, had moved on to whatever comes after death. By summer 1942, the tide was beginning to turn. More escorts, better radar, improved tactics, breaking of German naval codes, all of it gradually shifting the balance. The U-boats were still dangerous, still deadly, but less dominant, less overwhelming. Convoys suffered fewer losses. More ships reached Britain safely. The Atlantic remained brutal, merciless, unforgiving, but survival became more likely, hope more justified. Harper completed his service in October 1942, transferred to shore duty, assigned to train new radio operators at the naval base in Halifax. He taught the technical aspects of the job competently, professionally. Signal procedures, frequency management, equipment maintenance. But he couldn't teach the reality, couldn't explain what it meant to hear men dying, to document their deaths, to witness suffering you couldn't prevent or end or even acknowledge. The young trainees, fresh-faced and eager, asked him about his experiences at sea. He told them sanitized stories, edited versions that omitted the worst details. He described convoy operations, escort tactics, U-boat encounters. He didn't mention the voices, the phantom transmissions, the way radio waves carried not just information but suffering, despair, death itself transmitted across hundreds of miles to be received by men who could do nothing except listen and remember. The war ended in May 1945. Germany surrendered. The U-boats ceased operations. The Atlantic convoys stopped sailing. The Battle of the Atlantic was over, won by the Allies through sacrifice, persistence, and seas stained red with the blood of tens of thousands of merchant sailors who died bringing supplies across an ocean that showed no mercy. Harper was discharged from the Navy in June 1945, returned to civilian life in Halifax, tried to rebuild something resembling normalcy. He found work as a civilian radio operator, handling commercial traffic for a shipping company. Routine messages, cargo manifests, weather reports. Nothing dramatic, nothing traumatic, nothing that reminded him of the war. He married Sarah in 1946, the girlfriend who'd written him letters throughout the war, who'd waited for him, who'd loved him despite the changed man who returned. They had 2 children, a son and a daughter. He built a normal life, a peaceful life, a life that bore no resemblance to the hell he'd experienced in the Atlantic. But the voices never left him. They remained, always, lurking at the edges of his consciousness. Sometimes, late at night, when the house was quiet and everyone else was sleeping, he'd hear them again. Faint, distant, transmitted across decades rather than miles. The distress calls. The maydays. The desperate pleas for help from ships that no longer existed, from men long dead, from a war that had ended but whose echoes never faded. The Echoes from the Atlantic Gap, Act 3, Part 1. October 1962. Halifax, Nova Scotia. 20 years have passed, but for Thomas Harper, the ocean never let go. The war is long over, the convoys are a memory, but the voices still come. Sometimes faint, sometimes clear, always the same, men calling for help in the dark. The static is his curse. He works now as a senior radio operator at the Halifax Coastal Communications Station, a squat, windowless building on a cliff overlooking the Atlantic. Every night, he sits alone in the low hum of equipment, surrounded by the soft glow of dials and meters, the faint crackle of distant transmissions bouncing off the ionosphere. Merchant traffic, fishing boats, weather reports, coded naval chatter, the soundscape of a peacetime sea. And beneath it, always, the whispering hiss of memory. Harper has aged, but the Atlantic has not. His hair is gray, his hands tremble slightly when he tunes the frequency wheel, but his mind is sharp, tuned like the instruments he tends. The young operators call him the ghost listener. They think it's a joke. It isn't. He never told them the truth, about the night in 1942 when he heard a dead ship calling from the bottom of the sea. Outside, the wind howls against the building, dragging sheets of rain from the black horizon. The weather reports call it an early winter storm. Harper calls it familiar. He can feel the Atlantic's anger in his bones, the same chill that once froze men to death within minutes. The same sound of waves slamming steel. He glances at the clock. 23:48 hours. Routine night. Static fills the room like breath. He adjusts the gain, shifts frequency bands, listens. A long-range signal from the North Atlantic crackles through, a tanker reporting position near Greenland. Another, fainter, from an Icelandic trawler. Then silence again. But in that silence, something changes. A tone. A pattern he knows too well. 3 short bursts. A pause. 3 long. Then 3 short again. An SOS. Harper straightens in his chair. The hair on his arms rises. The distress call repeats, faint, ghostly, stretched by distance and interference, but unmistakable. He scribbles coordinates automatically. His hand freezes. 52 north. 35 west. The same. Exactly the same. He knows those numbers. They've lived in his head for 20 years. The position of the SS Brookfield, the ship that died twice. The signal continues. Static swallowing syllables, but the words are the same he heard in 1942. The same plea, the same rhythm, the same young voice cracking at the edge of terror. Mayday, Mayday. This is SS Brookfield. We've been hit. We're sinking. Water is rising fast. His breath catches. He turns off the recorder, checks the date. October 14, 1962, the anniversary of the original transmission. He had not remembered the date until now. The voice goes on. We're in the boats now. The ship is going down. Please, someone, help us. We're alone out here. The static deepens, turns to a low roar, then clears again for a moment, like a curtain of noise lifting to reveal something underneath. The voice stutters, repeats, then fades. The transmission ends after 12 minutes. Exactly 12. Harper sits motionless. The room is silent except for the soft ticking of the clock and the whisper of the sea through the storm outside. He checks the frequency logs. Nothing scheduled. No ship anywhere near those coordinates. The maritime network confirms it within minutes, no distress traffic, no emergency beacons, no contact reports. He replays the tape. The sound is there, faint, warped, but real. The same voice from 1942, identical in tone and timing. He doesn't sleep that night. He can't. The storm outside rages through until dawn, pounding the coast, shaking the windows. Harper stays at his desk, staring out toward the invisible horizon, the same direction he once sailed, the same darkness that swallowed the convoys whole. When the morning shift arrives, he says nothing. The young operators laugh about the storm, complain about static interference. Harper logs the night as routine monitoring, atmospheric anomaly on 500 kHz. Nothing more. But in his notebook, the one he keeps in the locked drawer, he writes 3 words beneath the date, it called again. The following nights bring more storms. Each time the weather turns violent, the same thing happens. Faint voices, ghostly signals, identical distress calls, always from the same position. He records them all, though he never reports them. He knows what the Admiralty would say. Atmospheric reflection, tropospheric ducting, magnetic interference. Rational words for irrational events. Yet the pattern is impossible to ignore. Each transmission happens on the anniversary of the Brookfield's loss, down to the minute. Each one lasts precisely 12 minutes. The same beginning, the same end. Always fading into silence at the exact moment the ship would have gone under. Harper begins to keep a second log, not the official one, but his own. He notes time, weather, signal strength, moon phase, sea conditions. He is methodical, disciplined, but there's something else now, obsession. He spends hours listening, searching frequencies, hoping, and fearing, that the voice will return. In November, it does. This time, it isn't just the Brookfield. At 2:11 hours, a second voice breaks through, overlapping faintly, another distress call, this is SS Portland Rose. We've been hit. We're taking water. The same words, the same coordinates. 2 lost ships, calling together across time. The static swells until it feels alive, pulsing in the room. Harper grips the edge of the console. The air smells of ozone. The lights flicker. Then, as abruptly as it began, the noise dies. Silence. The tape machine stops by itself. Harper sits in the dark, his heart pounding. He realizes his hands are shaking. The Atlantic outside is calm now, unnaturally calm. The storm has ended, but the radio hiss lingers like breathing. He doesn't tell anyone. Who would believe him? The war ended 20 years ago. The dead have no voices, no radios, no reason to call. And yet they do. He hears them. The weeks pass. The transmissions stop. The weather improves. Routine returns. But Harper feels watched. Sometimes, when he leaves the station after night duty, he looks out at the black water and imagines lights out there, faint, flickering, like the running lamps of ships moving silently across the horizon. But when he blinks, they vanish. Christmas approaches. The sea freezes along the shore, the winds die down, and the city of Halifax is quiet again. Harper is alone on the night shift, as always. Midnight comes and goes. The equipment hums softly. He feels almost at peace. The next week brings fog, thick and unmoving. Halifax harbor disappears into white. Ships sound their horns blindly, low moans echoing through the mist like whales calling to each other. Harper arrives early for the night shift. The younger men are gone, the chief left him alone again. It's just him, the static, and the unseen sea beyond the glass. At 2:07, the receiver comes alive. No SOS this time. Just breathing. Slow, wet, ragged. Harper leans close, heart pounding. The microphone on the other end crackles faintly, like someone adjusting it with shaking hands. Then a whisper, so quiet he barely catches it. Cold, so cold. He jerks upright. The voice is new. Not the Brookfields operator. Different pitch, older, worn by pain. Harper checks the coordinates. The signal source is moving, closer to shore. Impossible. There are no ships in range. He checks again. Same result. The transmission continues, the whispering growing into broken phrases, fragments of memory. Lights gone, can't see the others, water rising. The tape recorder whirs. Harper's pencil trembles in his hand. He knows that tone, the sound of men realizing they will not be saved. He's heard it 100 times. But never like this. Never here. When the signal finally cuts out, he stumbles outside for air. The fog is so thick he can't see the water, only hear it. A faint rhythmic sound reaches him from far beyond the rocks, metal striking against something solid, again and again. A bell? A buoy? Or something else? He stays until dawn, staring into the whiteness, waiting for it to fade. It doesn't. In the following weeks, the signals change. They no longer come only on anniversaries. Now they arrive whenever the sea is rough, whenever wind rattles the glass and the temperature drops. The same 12-minute pattern repeats, but sometimes with overlapping layers, 2, 3, 4 voices at once. An entire convoy, dying again. The recordings pile up. Harper listens for hours after every shift, trying to find meaning in the chaos. There is none. Only repetition, only the endless act of drowning. He begins hearing them even when the radio is off. In the hum of power lines, in the clatter of dishes, in the distant echo of church bells. His doctor calls it tinnitus, a symptom of age and stress. Harper nods, smiles, agrees. Then goes home and writes a new entry in his secret log, heard them again, without signal. Volume increasing. March comes with another storm, the worst since 1950. Wind howls like artillery across the coast, waves smashing against the cliffs. Harper refuses to leave the station. The younger operators are ordered home, but he stays, alone, surrounded by radio ghosts. At midnight the first signal comes. Then another. Then a dozen. The entire band erupts into chaos, voices layered over each other, men shouting orders, coordinates, prayers. It sounds like the Atlantic in 1942 all over again. The snow outside glows pale blue from the lightning flashing over the water. Harper records everything. Minutes blur. He writes nothing, just listens. The room vibrates with sound, the consoles flickering, gauges trembling. Through the roar, one voice rises above the rest, calm, measured, familiar. This is HMCS Snowberry. Convoy HX-175 under attack. Multiple ships hit. Request immediate assistance. Harper's blood runs cold. That's his old ship. His own voice from 20 years ago, transmitted back to him through the storm. The words are identical to what he logged the night the Portland Rose went down. He can hear himself calling for help, the young version of him who still believed rescue was possible. The lights flicker, dim, then flare bright white. The room smells of salt. He hears water sloshing across the floor, though it's perfectly dry. The storm outside peaks, shaking the walls. Every instrument needle slams against its limit. Then silence. The power fails. The radio dies. Harper sits alone in darkness, the glow of the storm filtering faintly through the window. Slowly, the emergency lights hum to life. The floor is dry. The static is gone. Only his breathing remains. He stands, goes to the recorder, checks the tape. It has stopped mid-reel, melted by heat. Nothing remains but black plastic fused together. He opens the window. The wind hits him with freezing spray. Out at sea, he sees them again, lights moving slowly, dozens of them, forming a line across the horizon. Ships without sound, burning faintly blue. The convoy. He whispers their names, Portland Rose, Northern Star, Brookfield, each one answered by a distant flash of light, like acknowledgement. And then they vanish. Morning finds the station half destroyed by lightning. The others discover Harper at his desk, alive but silent, staring at the dead equipment. The logs are empty, the recordings burned. Only one note remains, scrawled across a torn page in his handwriting. They made it through. No one ever understands what he meant. The official report blames the storm, an electrical surge, possible hallucination from exhaustion. The station is rebuilt, new operators trained, the old records sealed. Harper retires the next month, vanishing quietly from public life. But every year, on February 14th, sailors in the North Atlantic still report hearing faint SOS signals on longwave frequencies, always from ships that no longer exist, always from 52 north, 35 west. 12 minutes at a time. Then silence. Some call it interference. Others call it memory. Harper, wherever he is, would call it proof. Because in the Atlantic, nothing ever truly stops. Not sound. Not time. Not the dead. Only the echo remains.